13th, 2019. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chris, welcome. Why don't you tell us about RL 197? Roll call, I'm sorry.
Holy smokes.
Councilman Scaringi.
Present.
Councilman Livingston.
Present.
Councilwoman Cross.
Present.
Councilman Taylor.
Present.
Councilman Tapstrap.
I am present.
Councilman Massa.
I am present.
President Scanlon.
Present.
All seven here.
All right, why don't you tell us about 1974, please?
Okay, what I'd like to do is amend the current code enforcement budget to equalize the salaries for the four code inspector positions that we have. This will not increase the sum in the budget line. It's just a redistribution of existing funds. We currently have 4 different salaries available to our code inspectors. At this time, all of our inspectors are new hires within the last 6 months. Actually 2 within the last 6 months and 2 starting on Monday. They all have similar experience and skill sets. They're all provided with identical training and have the same duties and responsibilities. So rather than having a significant range in salaries, I think it would be fair and effective to adjust the allocation of funds so that they're all earning the same salary.
Okay, questions? Go ahead. Councilman Taylor, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr.
You got 3
President.
questions.
In the budget, it says that one of the code inspector positions is vacant. You mentioned that all code inspectors are now new hires. Does that mean that all 4 allocated positions are going to be taken as of?
That's right. We have 4 code inspector positions, which is our entry-level position. We have 4 code enforcement officer positions, which is the advanced level. At this time, we only have 3 qualified code enforcement officers. So we are still going to be not quite filled to capacity, but in light of the fact that one of the code enforcement officers' position is vacant, we do need the extra inspector, so we're filling that vacancy and bringing somebody in.
So the person theoretically who would be making $36,000, that's a new person that would theoretically be making that $33,632.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
There was a previous conversation with your predecessor that didn't go anywhere, but I think that all of council, I guess, identified with in terms of the issue. Just that, his opinion was that the code enforcement officers and the code inspectors were underpaid, and that there should be, and he felt that there should be a more adequate pay for the level of work they do, the danger that they put themselves in, and I tended to agree with what he said, but I think that council agreed in that we should, make these decisions in the future. We already knew that he was leaving, that potentially you or somebody else would be taking his place. Do you tend to agree with those concerns that your predecessor shared with us? Would be my first question.
I do. I believe that it is actually becoming increasingly complex. The position has an increased emphasis on community outreach, has an increased emphasis on technology and code inspectors' ability to use it. This is no longer the era of DOS or Word documents. We're using more and more complex systems all the time. Our database is becoming more intricate, and we're on the verge of possibly rolling out a new database software that's been developed up in Schenectady and Albany by the Center for Technology Advancement. So there's definitely an increased skill set. But with that said, we're not looking at this time for an increase for anybody's salary. All we're doing is redistributing existing funds so that the 4 positions are all funded equally.
Do you find that you have interest, for example, in the code enforcement officer position that is still vacant? Do you find that there's interest in the position and then less, but not interest once they realize what the salary is? Do you think that having a higher salary would help fill that position?
It would, absolutely. That is actually a promotional position, so it's not actually they don't qualify for it until they've served as a code inspector for 4 years. So the problem with not filling that today isn't so much that the salary doesn't reflect the skills that are required, it's that you have to be here for 4 years, earning and gaining experience to be able to qualify for that. So at that time, where somebody is qualified, it would still be an increase. I think that's
Sure.
enticing to anybody who's been with the department for 4 years and is looking to stay. So I think it's probably, if we were to make any adjustments in the future to the salaries, it's probably the starting salary and getting them in the door to begin with that would be the more effective use of the dollars.
That makes sense.
I did look at salaries, across the state for the code inspector and the code officers, and we're considerably less than other municipalities. Probably the next, Oneana is, for code inspector, their range is 40 to 45,000. From there, it just goes on up into the 50s and 60,000 for code inspectors. I didn't take job description to job description, I just did a quick search just to get an idea. So we're well off what the normal hybrid salary is for code
That's what I've read as well, and it seems to me that $33,000 is pretty low. I was wondering, Chris, if when this conversation about averaging out these salaries happened, either with the mayor's office or I'm not sure who, was there talk of an increase in salaries as part of this discussion, or was that never brought up?
We were not discussing that at this time.
Okay. Well, I will say, based on the conversations that I've had with code enforcement officers and just the great job that I see that they do in my district, that, I would like to see an increase as we discuss, their salaries. I think it would be pertinent to discuss an increase, but if not now, certainly as part of this year's budget discussions. That would definitely be a priority of mine. I don't know what other council members think of that.
Well,
But
it should be discussed at budget.
That's a
There's
good
nothing
time
you
to
can do
discuss
about
it.
it right now.
Yeah, but I think at budget, we do need to raise it.
Well,
I know we've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah, we talked about it a
It's a
lot
matter of finding the
last
money
year.
for it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Councilman Livingston, do you have a question?
I didn't.
Okay, Councilman Screen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks for coming down, Chris. You touched on increased skill sets across a range of positions. So if I'm understanding this correctly, looking at the actual budget line itself, so that 33,632 number a year, is that a mean salary or the average of the salaries respectively that have been adjusted across those positions?
It's taking the four code inspector salaries, grouping them together in one lump sum and dividing it equally.
So averaging
That's
them
the
out.
average number,
Yeah.
for the code
Yeah, I've got it.
inspectors.
I've got it right here.
The problem that we're having right now is that,
Yeah.
being that they all have similar skills, similar training, similar duties and responsibilities, but the way that the salaries have diverged over time, we're looking at a salary of 32,148 for one inspector and a salary of 36 for another. And I
Right.
just don't think that the skill sets diverge that much. I
No.
think that it would be more fair and just to keep them, bring them all in at the same salary.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, in this particular situation, so that leads to my next question. So given that parity across the board of skill sets right now, does this lock us into anything in the future if a Jane Doe or a John Smith walks in the door, fills out an application, and actually does have that increased skill set that would be valuable for the code department? How can that be leveraged from a financial perspective going further?
Well, it's a good question. We wouldn't have a vacancy at this time, so we wouldn't be able to entertain the interest in the position, but should
Right.
an interest in the position arise where somebody has a much, higher skill set than
Right.
what we've had in the past, that would be a bridge that we'd have to cross when we get to it. I would
Right.
Maybe, at that time, be inclined to make another request
Right.
and have a conversation with the mayor and the comptroller to see if there's any way that we can be a little more fair in the compensation considering
Got it.
the level of qualifications that applicant.
Right, and I recognize there's an assumption of a vacancy that actually, we want to knock on wood that actually isn't ending up not being the
Right.
case, of course, but,
Keep in mind that the union contracts are in place and have,
Correct.
starting salaries, so that's another thing. that
That's
we
another
look
end.
at.
Thank you, Trish. And my last question was, so you had actually touched on new software?
That's right, yes.
And this is a conversation that I've had with a number of code inspectors regarding the current program that's being used now. My understanding is that, I don't know if it's a situational basis, on a property basis, or if it's on a violation basis, but my understanding is each filing incident is pretty in-depth in terms of time.
It is.
I've heard upwards of 35, 40 minutes.
It can be.
And that's literally to just have to input information. So can you share with us anything regarding this new software program? Is that more efficient? Does that scale time back? I mean, that's more time they could be filling out other reports, that they could be actually out in the community or in a neighborhood, taking care of specific violations. I was just wondering if you could touch on that at all.
So the new program that was developed in Schenectady, and it's being used right now by 5 different municipalities on kind of a testing ground basis, trying to work out the kinks so that it can be made available to any other municipality that has an interest. It's called Municity 5. It's a much more robust system, and it was designed specifically for our uses, whereas the current database that we used was more of a system designed for fire departments with some slight modifications to make it applicable to our use.
Got it.
Unfortunately, it's not as robust and well thought out as something that was built specifically for a code enforcement office, so there's a lot of workarounds.
Yeah.
It's a great place to enter data, but it's very difficult to get the data back out. So we have
Right.
a much more cumbersome process, a much more cumbersome data entry process than you would have with this other program. So, and it was developed long before the hardware that we have available to us today. So the Municity 5 software was designed to be used with in-field instruments like a tablet or a
Oh, that's
phone,
great. So there's
where
more.
data can be entered on the spot. That would also give you the capabilities to document different
Right.
conditions with the camera
Right.
on your device. That would be instantly
That's great.
loaded directly to that address.
That's great.
We now are using cell phones that then have to
Right.
be downloaded and then moved to different parts of the database. So it really does streamline the data collection process, the data entry process, the notification process, and it gives the opportunity to spend a lot more time in the field and a lot less time in the office.
That's good.
It links a lot of data together, and it actually comes with a very appealing feature, which is called Code, and that's the Code Officials Database Exchange, which allows us to share all the data that we collect and enter with all the other municipalities that are using the program. That would give us much more access to information that's difficult to retrieve now, such as who's the owner behind the LLC, what's their actual mailing address, phone numbers. So if we have players in Syracuse or Suffolk County that are also doing business in Binghamton, it will be much more easy to make contact with them and give them proper notification.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad to see that the mayor as well as yourself are making that changeover a priority, because I know this has been quite an issue that I've heard for some time, so I really appreciate, the mayor's office and you and Trish working on that. By extension, forgive me, and this question I totally recognize you may not have an answer for right now. So by extension, if we're going into a new code program, the first thing that pops into my head is, to what extent does that hamper its connectivity to the building blocks initiative?
I think that there was some conflict because they're two different software developers. So
Correct.
they're really not in favor of assisting each other
Right.
with their marketing and promotions, but they did come to an agreement where The data from building blocks would be shared with Municity 5 on
That's
a
great.
periodic basis, rather than being instantaneously uploaded and shared. It gives us the opportunity to continue the use of building blocks without sacrificing any of the information that we've gathered there. But this, I think, is very similar to building blocks in that it can be used as an analytical tool, but it has one added advantage, that it's also an operational tool. So
Right.
rather than mapping data and just seeing how it plays out across the city, it also gives us the opportunity to use it on a day-to-day basis, where building blocks is more just for reviewing.
Documentation and
Yeah,
things like that.
taking a look at what's already been documented.
Right.
Municity 5, but they did work out an agreement where they're able to play together nicely without infringing on each other's rights or business interests.
Got it. So that on some periodic basis, they will communicate,
I think it
would
was
they
a
talk to each
weekly-
other, so to speak?
Yeah, it was a weekly data share
That's really
from building blocks to the Municity 5 program.
That's good. I appreciate that. Thank you, Chris, very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
President.
you.
Councilman Papster, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Chris.
How you doing?
My first question is this a civil service tested positions at the code enforcement?
Yes.
And you, Trish, you mentioned that union contracts are being negotiated. Are these salaries in any way tied into the union contracts?
Yes, all of them are. They have their contract isn't up though until, yeah, it's 2021.
Oh,
Yeah.
so,
But they're flexible, the CSA is very flexible. If we need to make changes because of competition out there and hiring, we can go to them and ask them for an MOU if we need to update salaries. They're usually very agreeable to that.
That's good.
okay, and finally, are they city residents?
Two of them are not.
The two we just hired are city
Are
residents,
city
which is
residents?
phenomenal because we have not
Yeah.
been lucky with that.
And the two that are recent hires that are in place have both received waivers from the Civil Service Commission. It was a circumstance where at the time that they were hired, we did not have any applicants from within the city of Binghamton. We're fortunate enough to have two very qualified candidates who reside in the city of Binghamton apply and met all the minimum requirements for this position.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Any other questions? Thank you for coming down, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Trish, thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Thank you, Trish. No.
Jared, you're up.
I think Megan's up first, right?
Let's do Megan first.
Looks like it, yep.
Megan, yeah, let's do Megan first.
She's got that little slot.
Yes, she does, yeah.
Yes, we have, so this is offer to donate 12 Broad Avenue. This is a vacant and blighted building on the east side that President Scanlon you're familiar with.
Yep.
The applicant is the property owner, obviously. Her mother had lived there. She feels she doesn't have the financial means or interest to rehab the building, so she'd like to donate it to the city.
I'll tell you a little background on this. This building has probably been vacant for, neighbors estimate 18 to 20 years, and the woman has always paid property taxes. Meanwhile, the place has fallen in amongst itself, and finally, through Megan's work, it's getting donated to the city. So,
Great job,
it's a
Megan.
great deal.
And they paid the taxes.
They pay the taxes.
Incredible.
So do we have a plan for the property, demo or?
Demo,
Yeah.
yes,
demo.
and I believe there is a neighbor that's expressing interest verbally to
Buy the
go to the
property.
SILAB program.
Mhm.
Neighbor's currently maintaining a lawn right now to the left, so I think 14 Broad,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Thank you.
Other
Good
questions?
work.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, RL 19-75, this is in conjunction with the Court Counsel's Office for 109 Walnut Street. This was a fire going back a couple months. Ken can probably explain the process. fire.
I think we've done this before. This was a fire, I think, on February 9th. This is an odd circumstance because I spoke to the owner within a few days. He advised me that he had insurance. This was the fire where his brother had died in the fire. So obviously trying to be sensitive to that. I said, not a problem. Please give me a call. Never heard back from him. I've written to them, I've called, haven't gotten anything. So at this juncture, I think the city has to move forward with it and we'll commence an action against him to collect. But he said there was insurance, it's a lot. It's the owner. Well, it's the owner. If the owner collected insurance, we'll get it through there.
You can't go directly to the
No.
insurance?
And this is something that the constituents have been asking for and that I've been asking for personally.
Yeah, this is in a tough
So,
spot
yeah.
where it's located.
How quick can this be torn down?
I mean, we know, we went out and found a company to do it. So they're just waiting for us to give them the go-ahead.
Could be within a couple of weeks then? Good.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So it's expedited? We can
Yes.
vote on it?
Councilman
Yes, we
Lewis.
voted on it.
If we're not able to recover the cost from the property owner, what typically happens?
The value of the property isn't obviously gonna be worth the cost of demolition anymore. We don't end up collecting it.
It just,
I mean, if
we
we
just
can't
need to.
collect it from
okay.
somebody, it becomes a lien against the property, nobody else can do anything with it. Presumably, they'll stop paying taxes, the tax foreclosure will wipe out the lien, the county will take control of the vacant lien.
Is this something that we could work with the county land bank on?
For them to pay for the demolition.
What's that? Yeah. Because their budget comes mostly from state grant.
Haven't seen them do that with fire damage.
Yeah, because this isn't, Mr. President,
ahead.
this isn't just demo work. I mean, this is also a lot of debris cleanup as well due to safety and hazards with regard to the neighborhood, I would imagine. I mean, obviously, a demolition is involved, and
I
I'm
mean,
not
we've
saying
certainly
that,
worked
but-
with the land bank. in the past,
Yeah,
but I-
sure.
But this isn't going to be able to, you won't be able,
Yeah, they wouldn't be interested in
Yeah.
a project like this, I don't believe,
Yeah.
because they typically deal with rehabs or
Yeah.
blighted properties that come through the county foreclosure process. And the point here is that we could wait for that to happen, but if that's in 2 years, this is right next to Walnut Street Park.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a safety
Mhm.
issue.
Other questions?
You got another question?
Yeah, Councilman Murphy, sure.
Has any of the neighbors expressed interest in the lot? Have we reached out to anybody?
We don't own the lot, nor will we until
Right.
it goes through the tax foreclosure, so ours is a safety.
Right, knock it
demolition.
down and, yeah, I got that.
Other questions? Okay.
Okay, the next series of RL regarding the Boys and Girls Club, it's a youth programming. This initiative was first announced in the mayor's State of the City address. This is to transfer old unspent CDBG funds. This is as part of our reconciliation that Jeff Jager and Steve Carson have talked about, identifying old lines where there has been unspent money, working backwards and forwards to clean up those lines and repurpose the funding for city projects. And so the first RL is to amend the budget and move the money. And then the second two are to enter into agreements for the two separate programs involving youth in the Boys and Girls Club. The Youth After Hours program and then the Teen Center Deployment program. And so those three combined will allow these programs to move forward. And there's some descriptions about these programs. The Boys and Girls Club previously received a lot more money from the United Way in the past, and were able to fund these programs without seeking assistance from the city. So we want to help them out in this effort.
Questions? Yes. Councilman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The RL says we're using fiscal year 44 CDBG funds, but when I look at the actual budget lines, it looks like it's years 35 through 39.
Yep, so working in sequential order here, RL 19-80 would essentially amend the fiscal year 44 budget to put those funds into fiscal year 44. Assuming council approves that, that would then allow you to enter into those two agreements based on the money that's now newly in fiscal year 44.
Correct. So we can use monies from 35 to 39 to amend 44's budget.
It's basically essentially a budget transfer because this is now going back multiple years. We need to repurpose the money somehow, and it's done as a budget modification. So when, if you're amending the if you're doing a transfer in the 2019 city budget, how the ordinance is written, Ken, I believe, is amending the 2019 budget, correct? So it's technically a budget amendment. It's really a transfer of old funding from unspent lines as part of our reconciliation to the current fiscal year.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I would clarify that in the ledge, but that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I just looked, technically it would just be I was trying to follow the established, but an amendment of the fiscal year 44 budget. I don't know if probably is a better way to say that. I'm just not, at the top of my mind.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Councilman Papster.
The transfer from such and such year.
Okay.
As long as we're on that subject, how many years have we been, when did we first discover unspent money in the CDBG budget?
2014. I would say 2014-15 was when you started to kind of get a more fuller picture of it. I would say that, principally it's making sure that Munis, our city's financial software, matches what it's called IDIS, which is the HUD software that they are matching. And, we're still working through discrepancies specifically in the home fund and seeing was money spent in previous years through CDBG that should have been through home or vice versa. So I would say, fairly early on as part of finding money. I think it was in the 2015, I think the mayor said that he believed it was close to $1 million. It was unspent in previous years. We've moved a lot of that money though, and city council has approved those transfers.
So we're
over
almost
5 years.
done with as far as the monies that have been
That's
left over.
correct. Yes, there's not hundreds of thousands of dollars more in unspent money, but at one point there was. The principal programs were, first time home buyer program got a boost, and the Boys and Girls Club has gotten a boost in previous years.
So when this money runs out, because we've been using it to fund the last 3 years maybe, or for the Boys and Girls Club to fund after school activities, fund memberships, and now that, with after hours teens, after hours for up to 11 o'clock. How will we, when the money runs out, how do we plan on funding this?
That's a good question. I think part of it has to do with the Boys and Girls Club budget. They've seen changes, again, principally from the United Way. That's fluid, will that come back? And then is the city, as part of its annual allocation of human service money or youth money, does the city council or the next city council, they want to make that a priority? Again, we've been able to do it a couple years with using some unspent funds, but it'll be another program that we'll have to see how everything shakes out with CDBG and where the priorities are. So it's the answer is kind of I don't know at this point, but if the Boys and Girls Club is able to identify other funding means, their need won't be as great in future years.
They're a good program, so I was hoping that it'd be continued to be able to fund it.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Councilman Screen.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I just want to thank Mayor David and the mayor's office for pushing this forward. I mean, I know this is a big coup for not just the city, but the ward. It extending those summer program hours is gonna be a really big deal for, you know, youth and youth employment, so just wanted to say thank you for the support on that.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Is there any questions you have, Dan?
If I had questions, I would definitely ask them.
Do you
I'm-
feel
I'm
okay
aw-
with what's going on here? Are you are you supportive of this legislation?
Not really sure that it's appropriate to have side talk.
Well,
in
I
the
mean,
middle
it's
of a
our
meeting.
job to support or not support the legislation. I'm just asking, if you don't support it, now would be a good time to have some questions.
I understand how the process works. Thank you, Danny.
Well, I just want to know because you haven't signed any legislation that's gone through, and that's our job. Do you support it?
We'll all find out on Wednesday.
If you don't
when I-
sign it, then that means you don't support it. When we sign out the legislation, that means we're supporting the legislation to send it to Wednesday night so we can sign it out into legislation.
All right, let's move on here.
Thank you, Mr.
Next, Jared?
President.
All right, so, this next RL, I would ask if possible, if it could be expedited for Wednesday. 5 Crandall Street is, a former, rooming house on Crandall Street. You drive down the street to the left, it's across from the current project that, Jerry Willard, First Ward Action Council is doing for the Crandall Street homes. It had previously gone through a couple of different rounds of trials and tribulations regarding planning. There really wasn't a way to make it legal with the different uses, and as part of our plans to demolish the building, the floor was found to be in not safe condition for asbestos abatement teams to go in. So long story short, the city today actually demolished 5 Crandall Street, and it's a part of a project with First Ward Action Council, down here at Trout Brook Housing Development Fund Corporation, and the land bank to create a community garden and green space to support the Crandall Street Homes project. So the land bank is investing roughly $18,000 in state funding to do the site work, plantings, creation of 2 flower beds for community gardens, and it will be maintained by the First Ward Action Council. So this house, again, with the other houses on Crandall Street, but this house specifically was a cause of concern with a lot of the neighbors. So we're able to get rid of the blighted property and again, an unsafe property. And by selling it to First Ward Action Council, they will unlock the land bank money, create a community garden, and that'll be permanent green space as part of the Crandall Street project. So we did some due diligence and reached out. At one point, Verizon's credit union was interested, but we got them all the information that they needed. The lot wasn't big enough for parking. They would have only gotten 2 parking spaces, so it wasn't caught. But we wanted to test out those options before selling it. So we think this is gonna be a positive project. The reason why I'm asking for it to be expedited is that the land bank funding has a sunset period, and because we have 3 weeks until the next city council meeting, I don't want to further delay it. We ran into some issues on Crandall with both getting the condemnation after it was discovered the condition of the floor, also making sure that NYSEG came in and clipped the utility. So we've been having some delays on this already, and I know that the land bank and First Ward Action Council will appreciate that.
Questions? Councilman Kraus?
Yeah, this is a house that I walked through myself with the owner, who at first was not interested in selling, and I'm really glad we were able to talk him into selling. It is, like Jared said, it's a property that we can't use. It's not like the other homes. It was a boarding home. They're very small rooms, which were, I feel like, just terrible way to live. The house was very much in disrepair, and we felt, Jerry Willard and I, through First Ward Action Council, we had discussed this as well, with having it be a green space in the garden, and I'm really glad to see that this is coming through.
They worked well on Front Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilman Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes.
Forgive me for my ignorance. What is the Trout Brook Housing Development Corporation?
It is an entity of the First Ward Action Council. That's the legal
That's their,
DBA, or it's an arm of the First Ward Action Council. Chalk Brook, of course, running through.
Gotcha, that makes sense. And then, you mentioned that, the First Ward Action Council would be, maintaining this, but are they also gonna be managing the organization? Who gets what plot? Is this all under their control, or is this, I mean, is there gonna?
I don't know if that's known at this point. I just know that the focus isn't as it is for some like the Vines Community Gardens where it's maximizing the square footage. They're going to have a couple of them, but I think it's mostly to retain it as a green space for plantings. But I don't know if there's someone specifically.
So it's a community garden, or it's a First Ward Action Council garden?
I think that they're going to have it as a community garden.
I think it's the neighborhood.
Yeah, that didn't come up specifically,
Mhm.
but the community garden was the phrase that they were using.
Okay.
I don't know if they're partnering with Vines or not.
Yeah, that was what I was wondering.
I
I
think we were
don't
just.
know if they were actually.
I haven't heard
Vines
that.
has a lot of projects.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mr. President.
Other questions, Councilman Livingston?
At what point did you know this was gonna be expedited?
I'm not sure.
Well, because it wasn't noted on here that it was expedited. I was just curious.
I likely should have done that when I submitted the RL, but I was waiting to talk to Margaret Strinzi, which I did on the phone today, to find out her exact timelines and to make sure that that was needed. And after I spoke to her, it was clear that it should be.
Well, I support the land bank, and I support using the land bank whenever we can.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Jerry. Jess, you're on for 19-81.
Can I interrupt
Sure,
before you
sure,
start, Jess?
absolutely.
Just remember, Chuck was here 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about 7 Hallway Street. you know, And it was our expectation then that we would get a guaranteed maximum price from Pike Developers that we'd be able to present to you, hopefully sending it out on Friday, together with some of the plans. They have been to COD. We didn't get it on Friday, we didn't get it today. They're saying they'll probably get it later in the week. Right, so when we get that, we will circulate that to everybody. But as Jared just noted, there is 3 weeks between this Wednesday meeting and the next meeting that you're going to have. So the mayor's office will probably ask you to have a special meeting in order to consider that. Right, so that we don't delay construction for additional time period. Once we get all the information and you have a chance to look at it, we want to make sure it's moving forward.
When would the special meeting need to take place by in order for the city to maintain the timeline?
I can't really answer that because if we got it tomorrow, you know, could we do a special meeting on Thursday? Is that enough time for you to review? I mean, the answer is, in order to maintain the timeline,
Yeah.
we would have liked to have approved it 2 weeks ago.
Fair enough.
You know, the goal was to have them starting to work in May. And so, you know, as soon as it comes in, but we'll circulate it to everybody as soon as we have it. We didn't get it. I was hoping maybe we could get it today, but.
It's on there.
Okay,
It's on our end.
they're telling us Wednesday, but, you know, when I get it, I'll give it to everybody.
Sounds good. All right. Jess?
RL 1981, in December, City Council passed a resolution for an agreement with the recovery for $45,000. In the legislation, we took it out of a human services line when the funding was supposed to come out of an opioid addiction recovery line. So I'm bringing this to City Council so we could submit a new resolution and change that to the appropriate line.
Questions or comments?
Thank you.
Jess, pending legislation?
So on Wednesday, City Council will be voting to accept a grant from DASNY for the purchase of a breathing air compressor system for the fire department, approving the sale of 23 Frederick Street, agreement with Community Potential for use of home funds for a housing project at 35 State Street. City Council will amend the 2019 capital budget for grants received against bonded projects, amend the 2019 capital budget to close out 2018 capital budget to close out finished 2019, sorry. Capital budget to close out finished projects, and then agreement with Jablon Studios for CDBG funding for $10,000 for her public arts in And then the last piece of legislation are the fireworks displays for Pride Palooza.
Oh, one, so, just correct me.
Yeah.
Their preference is to do it on the river?
Yes.
Similar to what we did with Pops
Yes.
last year.
Mhm.
I think one of the questions was, the river's unpredictable.
What's today? It's crazy.
Correct.
Mhm.
You know, so if not the river, are they not having it at all? Or is it an alternative location? And if it is the river, I can't remember, who sponsored, was Pops a city?
Binghamton Philharmonic.
Binghamton Philharmonic, yeah.
Okay, so I think something, the city should give a letter to the clerk's office, just saying,
Okay.
we have no objection to the use of the river
Okay.
for these fireworks.
Yeah, and just so council knows, I had the question, hey, what does DC say about this? And I actually checked in with them, and they say this isn't really our thing. They were more concerned about any type of chlorinated water going into the river. Because it was talked about having a waterfall for Pops on the River, and they were very concerned about that, not really concerned at all about the fireworks on a barge. So, which I thought is interesting.
That came up last year with Pops also, I was surprised as well.
Yeah.
So I think the city though should be the one, normally we require an owner's letter in the file. So I think the city should be the one to put something with the purchase and while not the owner, we are certainly the caretaker of the river within the city of Binghamton, we don't reject that use. But the answer is if that's the only
Yeah.
owner consent they have, then if the river's not available, they don't have another
They
location.
don't really,
If they wanna do an alternate, they need to give us a letter from that owner.
okay.
And I just was thinking too, should it be clear that, at the discretion of the fire marshal, given.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's always the
Yeah.
fire marshal.
Given current conditions, or at the time of the event, that type of
Yes.
thing? Okay.
Yeah, it'll have the fire marshal, that's always
Questions
always
or
a
comments?
condition for all fireworks.
Councilman Livingston.
This is just regarding like all the pending legislation. I know we had spoken at a couple meetings ago about getting the list of RLs with the short like description headers prior to the meeting. We got it before the last work session and it didn't come this time. I just wanted to
I'll
check.
make sure I send it next
Okay,
time.
I just
My
wanted to check to
apologies.
make sure there wasn't a problem there.
Yep, my
Cool.
apologies. I'll
No,
make sure I send
it's
it
all right.
next time.
No need to apologize.
Other questions or comments?
I have.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman.
Did you want to go? Okay. I was curious, actually, Corporation Council at the last business meeting responded to some public comments about the, what is the star exemption thing on 45 Court Street. And I wasn't really clear whether the city was going to get the money back from these erroneous star exemptions. And I'm just curious, Ken, if you had any news on that.
I'd have to ask Sharon what the comment was.
Well, I'm asking actually if the city is anticipating getting the money back from these erroneous star
Do
exemptions.
you want to make a motion to adjourn to confer with court counsel?
You're saying we have to go into executive session? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Okay.
to adjourn.
Yeah,
Mr. President?
go ahead,
Just,
Councilman.
just a broad comment, not related to any specific issue. Star exemptions are done through New York State, aren't they?
They are in their school district, not city.
Yeah, they're not city government, so I don't even know, I mean, if I wanted to write a check back for the star check that I got last year, the city would have no control over that because it's got nothing to do with us.
Well, it did happen through our city assessor's office. I mean, it's locally administered through our assessor.
Local
Through the county, though, right?
But local administration is not the same thing as state mandate on the local municipality.
Right, but the error was from a city appointee. It wasn't from the state or from the county.
That may be the case. I wasn't aware that there was a mistake that was actually made by a city employee, but I'm just saying in terms of receiving something back, I don't even know that we have the jurisdiction to be able to do that.
Well, we could write a non-binding resolution and ask the mayor to do that. I mean, if there are like a half dozen LLCs that got a star exemption erroneously over the last so many years, and if the city would like for those to be given back to the school district, give that money back to the school district, it seems like the mayor would be in a good position to lead the charge to have those star exemptions kicked back to the school district. I mean, it does seem like we have a role to play here if we wanted to.
I'm gonna make another appointment with the city assessor.
You're gonna make another appointment with Scott Snyder?
Yeah, because I want to, it's a point.
Okay. How do people feel about city council doing a non-binding resolution?
Won't sign it.
You won't sign it?
I mean, to me, it seems like, regardless of what happened, no LLC should be receiving a star exemption, so there was obviously some wrongdoing. I don't know what legally is required, but the right thing to do, it seems to me, would be that there should be some clawbacks, for the money. But I need to learn more about it myself.
Yeah, we would have to like literally speak to the department head and to, see what's going on with that. And find
Say
out what the
something?
regulations are
No, I'm
too.
just thinking here.
Okay.
I mean, what if we did get Scott down here to talk about
Yeah.
it? Would that be possible, or?
I think what, we can certainly do that. I don't have any
Yeah,
problem doing
because
that,
I don't
but
know, I mean, the star exemption goes to the school.
I think,
Just it has really
Yeah.
nothing to
I
do with
think
the
what
city.
Gio
They're
said
their own
is,
entity.
what Gio said is the right
Yeah.
answer. It's a New York State issue.
Right.
It's not a
Yeah.
Binghamton issue, it's a school district.
It's a school
issue.
district
Well,
issue.
I hear what you're
It
saying.
became an issue
I hear what
when
you're saying.
our employee gave the exemption.
Okay. I hear you.
That's, like, I agree with what you're saying, but that's the whole
But
issue here.
He made, he read the law, interpreted it wrong. It
Well,
wasn't like
Well,
he-
I don't
it wasn't
know
like-
if that's the truth.
Well, I would.
I don't really know.
Well, we all know Scott Snyder, and
Mr.
I'll vouch
President.
for his credibility. I mean, he would not just go ahead and do something like that, jeopardize his reputation and his job for a
He's
couple
been
hundred.
here-
I mean, for what?
Yeah, and how long has he been here?
He's been here
With the
since
city?
the.
Councilman Scridgy?
2000.
Yeah, I hear almost everybody using the phrase for understandable reasons. I don't know. And when we use that phrase, there are never decisions or comments that are made in objective and proper context. It's a legitimate concern that the councilman raised, so I think the next proper step should be to follow up with the city assessor. As Councilman Matzo also said, we've got evidently, according to the way the calendar falls, I didn't even know this, there's evidently an extra week between now and, so we've got some time. So I definitely will take it on my own onus to follow up with the city assessor myself. And
Well-
once I'm more educated about whatever that issue may or may not be, then, potential action can be taken from there.
Councilman Matzo brought up we should have him down here, and maybe we should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should
Yeah,
have
I
Scott.
don't
Can you make an
problem with that.
appointment, Jess, to have Scott down here?
Thank you.
Next work session, please. We can ask the questions of Scott. Whatever anybody wants to ask, we can certainly ask.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely.
There's one thing I wanna talk to you folks about, quickly. I spoke with Bernice about the, electronic disposal day. I asked her if she had any kind of things
Thank you.
to talk to us about. And she said she's doing a little bit more research, but she spoke with Johnson City today.
Yeah.
And she's getting together some information right now too, but
Cool.
she's working on it. She says it's not going to be free, the city will have to take on the fee itself, but it's something that she's willing to look into and see how we can make it happen. But she'll be down, I'm gonna ask her to come down to next.
Good.
I mean, there's a thought there too. I mean, if it's not free, but you can put it out there,
Right.
then maybe we could.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Right,
Yeah.
maybe, like they had the stickers for a little while. Just for the one electronic, they spend $3 to put a sticker on, or $2.
Whoever has stickers left over.
Yeah, there you go, you got stickers left over, there you
The
go.
stockpile
They're
in
worth
the
$5 a
closet.
piece now, by the way.
I'm
Mr.
just saying,
President,
That would be good.
I don't think that'd be a bad idea for an electronics pickup, even,
that would
even
be
if you had
for
to
it.
pay $3 to get rid of it, you're getting rid of it the right way.
Sure, if we can
You
figure
don't
out
have
what
to
it
drive.
costs.
It's not being thrown in Curtis Creek, it's not being thrown in the river.
Yeah.
You know, or being left out, where I've seen many TVs left outside, I had to call the city up and they did pick it up, but, because the people abandoned the houses.
Motion to adjourn, Mr. President.
Second.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
John, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
There's a couple people in my district, they live in Chamberlain Crescent, and keep losing their bank.